Welcome to Open Minds Lived Experience Conversations, where we get to learn from people who have lived experience of mental health and mental illness. Today, we're going to be particularly exploring eating disorders with the wonderful Nicola. Nicola, thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited.
So we've known each other for a number of years, and so I know bits about your experience, but tell me when things started for you. When did you start to notice that you were experiencing challenges with your relationship with food?
It started off initially as self-harm.
Okay.
That was the first time I kind of experienced mental illness. And that was when I was, I would say, 14.
Okay.
And it was only after I then took an overdose. I ended up in hospital. I was then kind of put through to CAMS, and it was CAMS who said straight away, "You've got an eating disorder."
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh. So to your mind, it was self-harm, led to suicide behaviour. Then CAMS reflected to you that the eating.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't think I had a problem with that.
Right.
Looking back, I did. I'd been subconsciously using disordered eating and over-exercising, and I was trying to lose weight, and I was very conscious of it, but it wasn't in any shape or form related to an eating disorder in my head.
Right.
But it was after that overdose, it was quite blunt. My first visit to CAMS said, "Right, this is what we're going to treat you for."
Right.
I still didn't believe them for quite a few months, really.
Right.
And sadly, because I was probably quite far into it at that time, even though I wasn't aware, they then really kind of rooted me through the eating disorder treatment, and my overdose and self-harm wasn't really addressed.
Are you happy to talk about your suicide period?
Yeah.
So do you recall what got you to the point of feeling so hopeless around how you were feeling, your behaviour? Do you remember what your...
I think for a long time, I just hadn't been myself. For a long time, I was depressed, and it just very slowly got worse until I felt... I don't think I really wanted to die, but it was just a kind of a cry for help, really. And it was all too much. I think I was having so many strong emotions. I didn't know what to do with them. And it's hard to say really when the eating disorder actually started, because it's all so subtle. And it was over a long time. But I do know I certainly got worse after that. Looking back at when I overdosed, I still was only in the very beginning of my eating disorder journey, and it then got worse in the years afterwards.
I think you demonstrate really well how complex eating disorders are. I think there is a perception that it's about, I want to get thin, so I'm going to start over-exercising, restricting what I eat so I can be thin. And it's so much more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a coping mechanism. It's a way of dealing with whatever's going on in terms of your emotions or your mental health.
Yeah. And that, I mean, it's weird to say, there was that thought, I want to be thin.
Yeah.
And there was the thought, there was so much going on, and I had moved schools at that time.
Right.
So it was almost trying to stand out, trying to make something unique about myself.
Right.
There were loads of different aspects. Looking back, it was nothing to do with how I looked, and it was nothing to do with the weight.
People often talk about there being a sense of control that can be exerted around food and exercise, where people might not feel in control in other ways. Is that reflective of your experience?
Yeah, I think I don't always resonate with that, because a lot of people have said that. And it wasn't really about me controlling my day to day, what I was eating, what I was doing with my body. It was more just, I wanted looking back, I can say this. At the time, I could have not, but I wanted people to visibly see that I wasn't okay.
Yeah, right.
So with the self-harm, I wanted people to visibly see that I wasn't okay. I self-harmed, people saw it and didn't say anything. And then I lost a lot of weight, and then I wanted to look ill. At my worst, I wanted people to look at me and go, what happened? So I could tell them. But the iller you get, the more scared people are to say anything.
Oh, God, yeah. So where were your parents in have you had conversations with them?
Yeah.
So when Cam said around your challenges around food, was that news to your parents? Were they aware of it already, do you think?
So my mum came with me to all my appointments because I was under 18. She knew I was having issues. I think it was still a shock to her. I mean, the word eating disorder is quite a scary word, and I think that shocked her.
Right.
Obviously, this was after the overdose, so that was the big shocker, you know, that things are that bad.
Right.
And it was my mum who I told when I'd done it. And yeah, my mum and dad lived together. I grew up with them, and I lived in the same house as them. And my dad more took the approach that he didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything, which I don't blame him for. I think it was scary for everyone. And I didn't want to talk about it, even though I'm saying something happened, I want to talk about it.
Yeah.
I didn't have the words, so I was physically showing people, you know.
So what were the helpful things? Through the period of having those conversations with Cam, starting to have it reflected to you what might be going on for you, what behaviours the people around you did you find helpful? And then I guess I'm going to ask you, what did you find less helpful? So what were the sort of, were there people you thought, oh, you know, they were so helpful in helping me deal with all this, or there were people that actually really made it tricky?
Okay, so I think that the helpfulness was just people, mum being there.
Yeah.
You know.
And did you feel able to talk to your mum and be open about it?
Not at that time.
Right.
No. It was more just that she was coming with me physically. She was taking, she had to take time off work to get me to all my appointments, and she never questioned it. She never complained about it. Right. She just was always there. I didn't want to talk about it, but I did know she was going to be sat right next to me if I did want to talk about it, and that was really helpful.
Right.
I think it was helpful when Cams were so blunt with me, because it really set that seed of, you are ill. Because before then, I still didn't think it was that big of an issue. But sadly, I can probably think of a lot more examples of things that weren't helpful.
Yeah. Can you share any of those?
God.
Without giving people away, maybe?
I think a big thing looking back that I'm still upset about is how I was very much spearheaded down this eating disorder treatment. And because I was underweight, it was quite urgent in their eyes to get my weight back up.
Right.
And therapy wasn't a part of that. Therapy isn't if you're malnourished, they want to get your weight up. And it was very much seeing nutritionists and being weighed, and just kind of people kind of shouting all these numbers at me and kind of showing me all these charts, and I still wasn't sat down and said, do you want to tell us anything? What do you want to talk about? What's bothering you? It was very much, right, this is what you have to eat. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, dessert. Wow. Your mum has to watch you, she has to cook for you. I was really kind of controlled. I don't know. I was, put down a route that felt very strict, and there was no chance to explore the cause. I have since looked into this because it's become, it was a huge part of my life, and I have, I spoke at a CAMS kind of meeting for people who had experienced CAMS as children, and kind of a review on what they wanted to say. Right. And I said, why wasn't I given therapy? But your brain physically shrinks when you're malnourished, and that it's, you can die, and eating disorders are deadly, and it's about getting that weight up, and only once the weight is up, you're then offered the therapy, and that's quite a standard procedure.
Because this is about more than 10 years ago for you?
Yeah.
And that's still the approach?
From what I hear.
You understand? Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense from a medical standpoint.
Yeah. It's odd, isn't it? I mean, we hear similarly around alcoholism, that until you deal with the addiction, you often don't get the mental health support. Yeah. And it just seems odd to me, because, and I do understand the physiological challenges around addiction and eating disorder, and how much you can move forward from a psychological point of view. Nonetheless, it would seem that, to me, that tandem, that being looked after emotionally while you're going through such, when you are used to being in control, and that being your safety net, that making you feel safe, to have that forcibly taken away from you without the emotional support seems.
It needs to be a hand-in-hand approach. But again, looking back, I was not able to ask for it. Yeah. Now I would say I would demand therapy. I said, give me therapy. That's what I need. That's what I want. I could have never said that when I was 16.
And it's really interesting what you said about the thinner you get, the less people are likely to talk to you about it, or indeed demonstrating self-harm. It's all part of the illness, isn't it? That the illness wants to stay in control, even though you desperately need help. But that staying in control can make you potentially quite scary to people around you, that they don't want to upset. And you've done the mental health first aid training, haven't you? That I do, and a lot of what we talk about is how important it is to talk to people about things, and to ask questions directly, in order that people feel safe and able to share if and when they want to, accepting that not everybody does. So your mum knew about it, and you could talk to her if you wanted to. On a practical level, are there things that helped you during that intense time, but ongoing, that helped you, around eating and meal times, and were there practical things that were helpful?
It's almost like anything that was helpful wasn't helpful until I wanted the help.
Oh, okay.
So, people trying to sit with me while I ate and, make my meals, and, going and getting weighed, and all the treatment I was getting, it was helpful, but I wasn't accepting the help for a long time. So it was only at least a year and a half, maybe 2 years later, that I wanted to then get better. And I think that's what everyone asks, how do you get someone to that point? For me, the big part was leaving school, because that was a huge trigger for me. Right. And like I said before, I had moved schools, and I was allowed to move schools. That was helpful. Sadly, it didn't work out as I had wished. I didn't make friends, I didn't settle in, but my family were very, if you want to move school, then we'll move your schools. And when I was finishing my A-levels, I had, my whole school life had been school, university. That there was no kind of question of it. Right. That's where you go afterwards. Right. And that's where everyone in my family had gone, and everyone in my social group was going. But it was really helpful to kind of, when I got so ill, the pressure was taken off. You don't have to go to uni. Right. You can take a gap year, and I was doing an EPQ during my A-levels, which is interesting because that was about selling my own artwork, which is what I've gone on to do.
Right.
But I was then told, you don't have to do that. And to me, it had never been an option to not do it. I was a really kind of high flyer, I do everything. But it was suddenly all of my kind of educational expectations were dropped, and that was really helpful. You know, the pressure of that was gone. Yeah, it's difficult to say what specifically helped me until I was ready to get that.
Yeah, right, yeah. And that is $1 million question, isn't it? How we get people to the point of wanting it. And I get, you know, you can't force people, can you? I mean, all we can do is love people and know people, or let people know that there's support there and where their support is. But of course, eating disorders, it's really complex because there is that real health risk around it. So, right, so if you ruled the world, Nicola, let's start with school. Was there anything within school that could have been more helpful than it was?
Absolutely.
What?
Communication.
Right.
CAMS. The school and CAMS were not communicating.
Right.
So school wasn't told that I was somehow, I don't even know how this happened, but somehow there was one teacher who didn't know I had to miss lessons to go to my appointments.
Right.
And I remember walking back through the corridor after a difficult appointment at CAMS.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I hear my name and I'm being berated for missing a lesson. And you know, it's A-levels, it's an important lesson, but no one had told her. And a simple thing, just the school needed to know.
Right.
They might have known and she might have just not got the message, but it needed to be communicated that I was struggling. And you could kind of tell with other teachers that they had been told. And particularly my tutor, she kind of gave me a safe space. She was a drama teacher and she had like a giant kind of, well, it was like an office, but also a drama storage room sort of thing. And in the mornings, I was allowed to go sit in there.
Okay.
And it was just the little things of, if you need some time, this is where you go. If you want to talk, this is where I'll be.
Right. Okay. So communication, openness, having people that were just there to look out for you and give you the space when you need it. Mm. And it also sounds like that flexibility of expectation, because it's not unusual, is it, that people who experience eating disorders are quite perfectionist and want to really do the very best.
Yeah.
So maybe hearing that you're about more than your qualifications and your educational journey.
Yeah, and just it really was just assumed I would go to uni. It wasn't, do you want to go to uni? It was, what uni do you want to go to?
Right.
So it, from the get-go, it was, that's what you do.
Right.
And it's just, yeah, not forcing people down a certain route.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so then from a parental point of view then, so looking back, or God forbid you were in a situation where you were supporting a young person in a similar situation to you, what do you feel like really feels important for you as a person who's going through that?
Again, having a safe space to talk. I think it was hard to talk about it at home with, you know, living with my mum, my dad and my sister. It felt quite a big deal if someone kind of pulled me to the side to have a serious conversation, and I felt very conscious of my sister hearing, or, you know. But what kind of evolved was the car journeys anywhere became the safe space for me and my mum.
Right.
And I don't know if that was kind of curated, but it, you know, if she wanted to bring something up that was difficult or ask me, you know, seriously how I was doing, she kind of always did it in the car when it was just us.
That's such a top tip. There's something about driving. It allows those silences. It takes the intensity out of the conversations. I don't know, we've got music on, you can,
Yeah, and you're both looking forward.
Yeah.
And it just felt less intimidating. And it was kind of, once you get out the car and you've got to wherever you go, cool, that's done. You don't have to think about it. And it didn't linger.
Right, okay.
Which was nice.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, my mum, she was just super supportive. Like, you know, it was really difficult for her, and I definitely didn't help her when I was ill, and I was fighting against her. But it was just the being stable. Just she didn't. Yeah. She was always there. Right. And she didn't take it out back at me.
Right. And I guess that's important for parents to hear, isn't it? That they might be the punch bag, but actually it's because they're the safety net that you feel like you can be the punch bag, that you can use them in that way and let your emotions out, be whatever's going on for you. And it's not that it's personal towards them. And actually it's a really important part of your recovery to have those people in your life that you can be your true self with and be open with.
She was 100% the punch bag, and but she has now spoken about this since, and she's come with me to an eating disorder unit to talk to parents and guardians. So she's taken what she's learned, and she thinks it's important to share it as well. And what she said was that whenever she was being a punching bag, she told herself, this is the eating disorder speaking, this isn't Nicola speaking. And I think that kept her sane.
And do you know if she had any support? Did she use any of the organisations, or did through that?
Not that I know of.
No. Have you used Beat, the website BEAT?
Not when I was ill.
Right.
Again, it's not knowing. Knowing. I wasn't signposted anywhere really. It was, you're in CAMHS, you get treated by CAMHS. No one, I didn't know about Beat. My parents didn't know about Beat until I was then kind of quite well into recovery, and that's when I got really involved with Beat.
So let's talk about recovery then. So it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because we always talk about recovery being a journey, not a destination. And in a way, we're all on a recovery journey all of the time throughout our lives. How would you say your recovery really started gaining some momentum? Were there things that really made a difference? You said about you really wanting to. Was there anything that tipped you over the edge from wanting to wanting to? Talk us a bit about what your recovery looked like.
Again, it was kind of circumstance and good timing. I had just finished my A-levels.
Right. And so you managed to go through, you survived?
I did surprisingly well.
Did you?
Even though I did a lot of work from home, but that's kind of the perfectionist thing. Even though I wasn't at school a lot of the time, I did more work than the people at the school.
Right.
And I did a lot of it at home. So yeah, I did finish my A-levels and I did really well. And I had a holiday booked with my friends, and this is first holiday, I'm only 16, 17, first holiday without parents.
Right.
And I had been told, again, quite bluntly, we won't let you go on this holiday unless you can at least maintain your weight, is what I was told by CAMHS. And I mean, that was the kind of seed was planted, because I then had a reason. Right. Otherwise, I didn't need to maintain weight. I didn't need to gain weight. I was quite happy in my illness. I didn't have a reason to want to get better. But this holiday was booked and paid for, and I was going to let my friends down massively if I suddenly was too unwell to go. So it just became about, right, you maintain weight. It wasn't, you have to put on this amount this quick. It was very slow. You're going to maintain your weight, and then next week we'll talk about it again, and if you've maintained it in kind of week after week, and then boom, I'm on holiday. And it was just, school was behind me, which was huge.
Yeah, right.
Because school was the big, I don't often talk about what caused it, because there's so many different things, but there was one big trigger, which was associated with someone at the school. Right. So once I left school, that was huge. Okay. And it was, I've left school and now I'm in a sunny place with my friends and my boyfriends, and I suddenly feel like an adult and it's a completely different person.
Right.
And I had independence,
Right.
you know, being allowed to go on holiday was huge.
Right.
And independence was a big thing because I was being told, you do this, you do that, you do that, you go to this appointment, then you eat this, you be watched to eat this, you know, it was all very regimented. And gaining independence back bit by bit was really rewarding, and it made me want to continue.
So that's fascinating because, again, it's really interesting for people listening, I think, that one of the things around anyone that has a mental illness, whatever it is that need to look after and protect, and actually that trust and that freedom sounds like that was really important, that you had an opportunity to have the autonomy to make the decisions for yourself, and it's not about people watching you and you feeling like, almost like, it sounds almost like it's not about then taking the comfort of the illness away. It's about, look at this incredible life you can experience and enjoy.
Yeah.
If you can move towards wellness. And
it was very much a before and after thing for me with school. I was a different person after I left school.
Right.
And I do wonder if I was at a different age, you know, what would have started my recovery, because it was leaving school kind of at that moment in time. It all combined perfectly in really good kind of circumstance. But if I had been told you've got 5 more years of this, I don't know what would have helped, because again, it felt like I was allowed to start fresh.
Right.
And I needed that.
Right.
But if I'm giving advice, how do you offer that to someone who's got 5 years left of school, or who's in a bad situation they can't get out of?
Yeah.
That's really hard.
Yeah. Although I think it's really useful to hear it, because sometimes, particularly when we're not particularly rational, if we're experiencing mental illness, we can feel like there are no options to getting out of the situation that we're in that feels unmanageable, or elements of the situation we're in that feel unmanageable. And I think what you're saying quite clearly demonstrates that for you, at least, that life change made all the difference.
Yeah.
And, you know, if someone feels like, you know, they've got to stay in their job because they've got to pay the mortgage on their 5-bedroom house, actually, if having a 2-bedroom house makes the difference to them being well, then maybe those decisions need to be up for thinking about. Where maybe, like your journey to university, you know, you needed to have the opportunity to go, actually, I have a choice here. It isn't an inevitability that I have to do that. I need to feel that I've got some control over my life decisions, maybe.
I think that's a really good point. And just being allowed to rethink life, what I want out of life, and, you know, then going, I've got a whole year off, was pretty amazing to do what I want. Yes, all my friends were going to uni, which was quite sad. I felt I'd been left behind, but every bit of pressure had just gone.
So let's talk about your life post-school then. So I know what an entrepreneur you are, and that for you, you've created a working life quite unusually. Talk to us about what life's been like for you post-school.
Okay, so in that year off, I ended up just kind of painting for a year. I was still living at mum and dad's.
Right.
And I was just recovering. I eventually got a part-time job just in sales, in Debenhams.
Right. And did that feel helpful?
Yeah, it did. I do remember I was still quite early on into my recovery then, and it was quite a big deal, kind of doing a full work day. And again, the whole kind of being told, this is your lunch break, this is when you have to eat, that was hard.
Right. So that's really fascinating to me too, about how organisations and businesses and bosses support or help or hinder somebody's ability to thrive in the workplace, particularly for experiencing a mental illness. Were there elements of that were helpful or unhelpful? Were you able to be open? Did you choose not to be?
I chose not to be, which I kind of surprised myself now. Why wasn't I? But again, I was still so young. I didn't want to give a bad impression. My first ever job, hey, I've got this mental illness, you know, that was quite a scary thing. So I just acted like nothing was going on. But it was the little things like being allowed, you know, I was in recovery, so I was kind of snacking regularly, and that was quite a big part to keep my calories up and to keep my energy up, because I had so little energy. And you weren't allowed, you know, you had to have a set lunch break. And we weren't allowed to bring a bottle of water up with us onto the sales floor and things like that. It was, you know, once you're on the sales floor, you're in work mode, no food, no drink allowed. And after kind of 3 hours, I mean, I was running on empty and I was really drained, and you know, it was still a big, my brain was always thinking about food at that time. So that was quite difficult.
How long were you there?
At least a year.
Okay, so you managed to make it work despite that. Wow.
I did actually really enjoy it.
Right.
And again, it was kind of going into adult life.
Yeah.
And then when I went home, I painted, and I kind of started to then think, this is what I want to do. I want to be an artist, and I want to make money from being an artist. And over time, it became my part-time job being at Debenhams and part-time job being an artist. And it slowly kind of morphed to something that was tangible to kind of earn money. And so I'm a silk painter, and that's kind of what I fell in love with straight away. Again, during my A-levels, I'd done a 20-minute lesson where we used silk, and that was just, I loved it. So when I took this year off, I bought all the supplies and I self-taught myself. Right. And then over, again, probably 8 years, 10 years, it's now become my full-time job.
And you live independently? Yeah. You've got your own place?
Yeah, so I'm renting by myself. I've got a dog, which is amazing. I've got guinea pigs. I've got a studio at home that I work from.
So Nicola Davis Crafts. So one of my prized possessions is a sunflower that you've painted on silk, which is in my hallway, which I'm so proud of. And I often try and buy your cards, because you give some percentage of your income from your cards to Beat, don't you?
Yeah, so I did a range of body positive paintings, and it's from those that I then donate to Beat. And kind of going back to that, no, Beat, I wasn't supported by Beat when I was ill because I didn't know about them. Yeah. But that's why I support them, so that I can spread the word and people who are ill can find out about them. Yeah. So yeah, I donate the profits from the body positive range to Beat.
And your book, which I've got a copy. I should have had it here. The sweet recovery book.
My super sweet recovery cookbook. Yeah.
So that's recipes, but also, so I have got a copy. It also, you know, has words of encouragement that if this meal feels too much, then you could then think about doing it a different way, and real sort of a supportive sharing of recipes. Yeah,
and again, a big part of recovery for me was gaining that independence back. Being allowed to cook my own meal was like monumental.
Right.
From being told you're not allowed to be in the kitchen, and I was told I wasn't allowed to be in the kitchen. Wow. And I had to sit at the dining table and I had to eat what I was given, and I had to be watched while I, you know, because I gave a lot to the dog originally. Okay. And a lot went out the window. Right. So you know, gaining that independence back was really like,
and wow. So that feels like a way that you can help other people.
Yeah, so the aim of the book that I wrote was to cook for yourself and to take the fear out of the kitchen environment. Right. To experiment in there, to have fun with food. It's kind of like a student cookbook. It's really simple. Again, it just takes the stress out, which is what I needed. I just needed all stress to be gone, to just play with food. And it's kind of like when you're teaching a baby about food. You're relearning.
Yeah. Portion sizes, what different nutrients you need.
Because it really felt alien. It really did.
Yeah, completely. Yeah.
There were times when I didn't know what a normal portion size was. Yeah. And I really had no clue. I was like, is that normal? And yeah, it was just learning to baking was my main thing. I've always loved to bake. And that was something I baked a lot when I was ill still, but I didn't eat any of it. And then eventually I kind of moved on to baking healthier versions of things and kind of teasing my way back in. And that's a big part of the book, is they aren't hugely calorific meals that are going to make you gain weight, because it's not about that. It's about wanting to eat it might be a healthier version with less calories, but it's that step to get you to enjoy food again, as opposed to forcing you to eat something you don't want to eat.
Okay, it's so brilliant. Yeah, yeah, it's really brilliant. Again, I'm very proud of my copy that you've signed for me. So Nicola Davis Crafts, and you've got an Etsy shop, which is where you sell a lot of your work through if people aren't local. So how would you describe where you're at? Is it for you, is this an experience that's gone and done? Is it something you need to still keep an eye on? How is it for you now?
It's been a journey,
Ongoing one, I'm sure.
Yeah. I still struggle with my mental health a lot. The eating disorder is behind me. I would say I struggle every now and then with guilt around eating food, but I don't ever act on it anymore. Keeping an eye on it, the only thing for me is not knowing my weight. That's really important. I do not want to know my weight. I don't weigh myself. At the doctors, I asked to be blind weighed, which is really important.
Top tip.
And they don't often suggest that you can do that. So it's kind of about knowing you're allowed to do that and kind of advocating for yourself. But other than knowing my weight, I don't really get triggered around things and I feel like I am recovered from the eating disorder. I still do have depression, anxiety. I was at therapy until a few months ago, which it sadly had to suddenly quit. Just my therapist had a family emergency, so that's now stopped. But something again I'm looking into, because it's with the depression. I think that is something that I still struggle with, but I'm now more open about it. And
does that help?
Yeah. It's because of the whole eating disorder thing, and the recovery, and then kind of making the book and making art about it. It's forced me to talk about it to the point no one's really shocked now if I say, "Oh, I'm having a really bad," I can talk about it quite easily now, and people are used to me talking about my mental health, and they, my family, my boyfriend, are really up for that. And as a family now, we're more open about our mental health than we ever were before. And my dad, who never spoke about it, now really speaks about it. So it's being able to, now I'm more open about everything. I'm more confident about it all. Even if I am struggling, I know what to do. I know who to talk to,
Have you had to seek support outside of the NHS to support your mental health?
Yeah, I wasn't able to get therapy through the NHS. I saw the mental health nurse, and again, I was kind of told you're going to have to do it your own way, because they don't have the resources, really.
And it's really challenging, isn't it? I mean, again, I think B are brilliant, aren't they? I think in terms of learning, if you're supporting someone, it's got great, properly in-depth training around how to go about supporting people. And at Christmas, I noticed they did one that was specifically around the challenges around food around Christmas. So supporting the people supporting, as well as the people that are experiencing it, which I think is really important. And the other organisations that are out there, and there's also you can call somebody, can't you? You can speak to somebody through B.
There's a helpline for adults and under 18s, and also there's a university helpline, I think, for people who are studying, like students. So
it's so important that people find people to talk to wherever you are in terms of experiencing or supporting people with mental illness, I think. And I think, the GP route should always be something that people feel valid and justified in going down, accepting that the timeliness of the support, if it's talking therapy you need, might not be there. But I would always, well, I don't know how you feel, but I feel like you should always go that route, even if you have to also look elsewhere.
Yeah, and it has to be said, there was one GP who was fantastic. And we really connected, and she basically offered me therapy in our normal checkups. She was just there she said, "You're here, you've got an hour to talk."
Wow.
And she didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And she really went out of her way, and she understood what I needed.
Yeah.
There are other GPs who absolutely have not.
And we have every right to go back, don't we, and say, I've not had a very good experience with this GP. Please, can I speak to someone who has a real understanding and expertise in this area? And I think, again, we tend to be quite apologetic. We know how busy doctors are and how under strain they are. And we're all, we almost feel not worthy of getting a good service. And I really would encourage people. It's hard when you're ill to advocate for yourself, but it's even to ask somebody else to do it for you if you don't feel able to
I think
advocate
that's
for yourself.
Super important, is to say, I want to talk to someone else, because the difference in a different GP can have, it can be black and white. Like, they could really help you.
And it's not reflective of you or how ill you are or how much you deserve the help. It's reflective of that particular doctor, their level of understanding, their level of stress and pressure. And so I think often we could just say, well, clearly I'm not, particularly with these, well, clearly I'm not that unwell, because they're not calling 999 and getting me put into hospital. So I'm fine. There's nothing to worry about. But that's absolutely, for me, around eating disorders, I think your body size bears no relation to how much you might be struggling around your relationship with food, and that anyone whose life is being limited by thoughts around food and exercise and diet, and possibly use of alcohol and other things that might be part of the survival that the eating disorders pretends to offer, deserves support and help. Anything else then that we've not talked about that you feel like you'd really like to say, or that feels part of your journey that you feel you'd like people to hear while we're having this conversation?
I think it's just going back to awareness. If the schools had known the signs, they could have maybe stepped in earlier. If we as students were taught the signs, my friends could have talked to me. And your friends are a really vital part of recovery. I was the one who had an eating disorder and I didn't know anything about it, so how could they? So I think that's really important, is educating people from a young age about mental health is super important. And BEAT offers that. They offer kind of ambassadors to come in and do a talk at schools, and I've done that with a few schools as an ambassador of BEAT myself. Just spotting the signs. Here's how to approach someone who might be struggling. Here's the website to go if you are, if you've got any questions, go on this website. And it's just signposting and education. Because if my friends had known, they could have been a real big lifeline for me. But I wasn't confident enough or ready to bring it up to them. And they had no idea what was going on. So,
well, I mean, I'm not going to argue with you. Of course, I think training and supporting people to know exactly. So I think often we have a gut feeling that things aren't all right with someone. And sometimes it gets to a point where people have to make it very physically obvious that they're struggling. And by giving people those sorts of skills, those conversations might be able to happen sooner, mightn't they, if you spot early signs. And so those embedded behaviours and habits that take years and years potentially to undo for some people could be avoided if those conversations and that support was offered earlier. And I think that's probably true in the workplace as well, because you experience this as quite a young person, but we do understand that people experience eating disorders at all stages of life. Perimenopause and menopause, I think, is often a trigger time for women, but of course men, boys also, which have a whole nother layer of feeling isolated and misunderstood still, even though it is much more understood that boys and men have similar challenges.
If I were to kind of meet my younger self, the most important thing to say is just that things can change. Because I felt very stuck on a route. There was a point where I was almost certain that I would be anorexic for my whole life. Like, that sounds extreme now, but back then I was like, this is my life now. This is all I'm going to be. And just that, yeah, you can kind of change your life around if you get the support you need, and if you commit to it, and if you've got the supportive people around you, that, you know, things can improve, which, you know, doesn't always feel possible.
Do you know what? I feel a bit emotional. Actually, I think that is such an important thing to say. I think so many people feel that and just feel hopeless then, that life will always feel that difficult. And that's when we get into a risk of people feeling like suicide is their only way out.
It's very easy to blame yourself. And a lot of it was taking it out on myself. I hated myself. I hated myself. I was my own worst enemy. And I had a lot of anger towards things that I had done or that had happened to me and that were my fault in my eyes.
And did anybody ever express thoughts of frustration towards you, like, oh, for goodness sake, Nicola, just bloody well eat a burger, that sort of thing? Did you?
Oh yeah. Like a lot. That's just education though, again.
Yeah.
They didn't know that it was not that simple.
Yeah. And that's why I feel these conversations are really so important, because I do understand if you've not been there, it seems very black and white. You know, you need food to fuel your body to survive. So just eat food. What's the big deal? But the anxiety and the challenge around every mouthful. You know, if you haven't, even if you're addicted to alcohol, you don't have to face alcohol. You can just, you know, and I'm not saying that it's easy to get over an alcohol addiction. Absolutely not. But you're not having to have a bit of it all the time.
Yeah.
It's potentially really triggering and challenging to get your head around.
Yeah, it's pretty all-consuming, which I think people don't always understand, you know, when you're supporting someone who's ill. And I was just angry at the whole world because my thoughts were just so consumed, and I was so hungry, and I was so just going mad in my head. And I wasn't, you know, they just thought I was grumpy and miserable on purpose. But I was really just, it's an illness, like you said, and you got to accept that.
And it's brilliant what you said about your mum being able to talk that back to herself in your most challenging moments, that it's not Nicola, it's the illness. And I think there's an awful lot around eating disorders, that, you know, people's reluctance to get well, people's being dishonest, hiding
it's a very
things.
dishonest.
It's not that they're a dishonest person or they're a bad person. It's the illness. It's not letting you let go. It's doing everything it can to...
And it's also very competitive, which is a whole nother thing. You know, I could talk about that for hours. And social media, that doesn't help. So there's all these different routes, and that kind of can make your illness so much worse. And using social media can be positive, but again, it goes back to education. You've got to know how to use it in the right ways, not be dragged down those rabbit holes.
I'm interested actually about you, an ice skater. I mean, like, I saw you at Sheffield the other week. Wow, how has that been part of your recovery and your relationship with exercise? Has that felt a safe way to be active? Has that played a part?
Yeah, big part. I was a competitive gymnast when I was a teenager.
Yes.
So I did rhythmic gymnastics at a national level. I did one international competition as well, and I trained alongside the Olympic squad. At that time, I was in a healthy relationship with my weight, but I was self-harming then.
Right.
So, you know, doing gymnastics, I was still struggling with my mental health. And when you're surrounded by people in leotards, there were definitely seeds planted that later on I can see did not help.
How old were you then?
Well, I started gymnastics when I was very young, maybe 6. But maybe when I was 15, 16, I got kind of into more serious competitions. Right. And that's when we went on my first international competition, it kind of opened my eyes, and that everyone was a lot skinnier than me. And I think that was a big shock. Again, that wasn't the cause, but that was just one of the many seeds planted. So when I did then retire from gymnastics, and I was sadly told I wasn't allowed to do any sport, and I was again back to the being regimented. I was told you cannot exercise. Eventually I was kind of encouraged to do gentle yoga and things like that. It didn't quite give me what I wanted. I went to the gym, and I very quickly found the gym was not a good place for me, and that was quite, it's just because of all the screens and the numbers, and it shows you how many calories you've burned. That wasn't helpful. So then I discovered ice skating, and now I've been doing that for kind of 10 years officially, but I started it, and again I was told to stop, and I took some time off. And then I started it properly, and now it's a big part of my life, and I compete and I love it, and that I find it really healthy. Like, I don't find, even at competitions, I don't compare myself to other people anymore, but I think that's just, you know, where I'm at, different time in my life. I'm in the adult community, and we're all very supportive. And it's one of those sports where it gives you kind of the grace, but you've also got to work on your strength, so it keeps me fit, and I feel like I've had a workout, but it's not too hardcore as well, you know.
So it sounds like, in a way, it's been a bit of trial and error trying to find the right fit for you.
I did everything. I did kickboxing, I did pole dancing. It was trial and error. I kind of went through everything to find something that worked for me.
Again, another top tip, that the things that might have been your go-to thing, that may not be healthy anymore, might be triggering, but it's not to say there aren't other things that could bring you more joy.
Exactly.
If you feel well enough and able enough to go out and try. So one of the things we've talked about, and one of the things we talk about a lot in our training, is about spotting early signs and the difference that it can make when we have these conversations sooner. So are there, and I know it's different for everybody, but in your experience, are there particular signs that you think a parent or a partner or a colleague might be able to spot that suggest that someone might be having a challenging relationship with food, weight, exercise?
So Beat has created a really good resource for this. It's called the Tips poster. So they have a poster for it. You can download it. You can email them and get copies sent to your work or your school. And they are kind of the signs they suggest to look out for. See if I can remember them all.
no test, go on.
So nips are people often nipping up to the toilet after a meal. That could potentially be cause for concern around bulimia. Skips are people over-exercising or exercising in secret. Kips are people very tired. They all, it's the Tips poster, so they all
right. Right.
So kips, are they often going off for a kip? Are they tired? Are they low energy? That might be a sign someone's malnourished. Flips, mood swings. If people are experiencing kind of change in mood, or they're not quite, the person they used to seem, or having mood swings, that could be a sign. Lips, are they obsessing around what they're putting in their mouth? The food, the calories, what's on the box, the labelling. That's obviously, big sign.
And am I making up slips around sort of clumsiness and not being able to concentrate?
I don't think that is.
Well, it should be.
We're going to have to check this.
Because I think we're recording this. I think it's Eating Disorders Awareness Week next week, maybe. Because I think I saw that pop up on social. So right, so let's run through them again. So nips is sleeping, going off for
right.
Yeah,
no, that's kips.
For the kips. Nip, is that nipping to the toilet after?
Nips going to the toilet.
Yeah.
Flips, mood swings.
Yeah.
Lips, what they're putting in their mouth.
Yeah.
Skips, over-exercising.
Yeah. And then the one I made up, slips. Because certainly concentration, when you're starving and all you're thinking about is food.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. There you
can
go,
have
B.
that.
You can have that one on me.
Yeah.
Nicola, I mean, I just think you're an incredible inspiration. I think whenever anybody uses such a challenging life experience that you've been through and has the courage to use that to really try and help people around them, you know, huge respect to you, and thank you for talking to us about it. And to Nicola Davis Crafts, I proudly give your body positive cards to anybody in my life, and I really recommend anybody else do that too. Nicola, thank you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for all you do in raising awareness, because that's what this is, and that's what we need. So
we're fighting the fight together. Thanks, Nicola.
Thank you.